This is Nicholas Eidolon, and I'm welcoming you back to the dungeon again. This is Analog Dungeon episode number 4. This is the second time I'm recording this episode because all of the footage from the first attempt was garbage. I got a new camera, and apparently I did not understand some of the settings and features, and the video ended up being chopped into different pieces, and the camera kept shutting down, and some of the files got all corrupted. It was a complete and total fucking disaster. But I'm hoping this second attempt goes a little smoother. Everything's fully charged, settings are adjusted. So one of the major reasons I wanted to get a new camera was because we had some focusing issues with the very old shitty iPhone that I was using to record the previous episodes. So hopefully we avoid those problems going forward. Let's see. In this episode, we are going to talk about Ancient Meadow Records, which is overdue since I've used several of their recent tapes as background music in the previous episodes. So I'm glad that we can shine a light on some of those tapes now. Ancient Meadow Records is based out of Kentucky, and it's one of the biggest labels in the dungeon synth scene. I think pretty much everybody who's a collector probably has at least a few things from Ancient Meadow. It's definitely one of the first labels that I went back to and bought multiple tapes from just because they were being released by that label. So, you know, I would go there not looking for a specific artist, but just looking to see what they were offering and grabbing stuff because I knew it would be quality because Ancient Meadow was putting it out. I first stumbled onto Ancient Meadow in late 2017. I believe the label was started in the summer of 2017. And late that year, I had just started listening to Dungeon Synth. And I think I had a few tapes by them, not a huge amount or anything, just a handful. And I wasn't really planning on developing a large collection at that point. I had been collecting heavy metal tapes for maybe a year and a half at that point. I had really started trying to put a collection together, and when I saw that Dungeon Synth was widely available, or I say widely, but relatively widely available on cassette, I started adding some of those tapes to my collection, mainly with the intention of using them as background music for Dungeons and Dragons, which I did and I still do when I DM D&D sessions. I've always got Dungeon Synth tapes with me in a boombox. But I think at that point in late 2017, I had some Sequestered Keep releases, definitely some stuff like that from Out of Season, and I know I had the Abandoned Places box set, discography box set from Rotten Shape. I was super lucky to grab one of those when they were still on sale at the label. And that's still to this day one of my most prized pieces of my collection. I love that discography set. But yeah, I was just Googling Dungeon Synth, basically looking for new artists and new labels and just more information on this genre. And I happened on the Ancient Meadow page, which had all of its tapes in stock, which I wasn't used to seeing from stuff on Out of Season being sold out pretty quickly most of the time. But the first run of tapes from Ancient Meadow, they were all still in stock. So I grabbed a few. I can't remember what all was available in that first run. I'm fairly sure that there was a Secluded Alchemist tape that I grabbed. I remember it came with a little potion bottle, if I'm not mistaken. So stuff like that was really cool. The sort of the extras and the accoutrements that were being shipped with some of those tapes. And I think I probably got, a nice message from Jordan when he, still had time to include messages and all of his orders. So because of that, I went back probably in January of 2018 and picked up everything else from that first release that I hadn't been able to grab the first time, or hadn't been inclined to grab the first time. And from there, I just started collecting. And it's really because of Ancient Meadow and, you know, some of the other labels like Out of Season or Depressive Silence, or just these different labels that I wanted to keep up with, you know, and some of the artists that I wanted to keep up with, that I made a Facebook page in 2018. At that point, I didn't really have any social media going on. I had gotten rid of my Facebook years prior because I just didn't really have anybody that I wanted to keep in contact with online. And I made a Facebook page just to keep up with music releases. And I guess because I followed the Ancient Meadow page, I was invited to the Dungeon Synth Cult group when it was started. Jordan invited me to that. And obviously now the Dungeon Synth community on Facebook is very important to me, and I've gotten to know Jordan a little bit. I've got to know some of the artists on the Ancient Meadow roster, and a lot of other folks at the scene, a lot of people that run labels, a lot of artists, and a lot of fellow fans. And it's just been really important to me. It's a great community, and I'm glad I was welcomed into it. So, you know, really I feel like I owe, you know, some of that to Ancient Meadow sort of pulling me into that scene. And I currently have a complete Ancient Meadow collection. Ancient Meadow really is my favorite label, and I have a complete collection right now. That wasn't true until a couple of weeks ago. I was actually missing the Vin Calder box set, which you can see here. So this is the second run of this box set. Basically, the first edition was put out through Brilliant Emperor, and the second version was put out through Forsaken Relics, Brilliant Emperor, and Ancient Meadow. And I actually missed the initial release of this, and there aren't that many copies. I think there are like 50 copies. Yeah, second pressing of 50 copies. So I actually missed this when it went on sale, and the first edition is pretty hard to find. This one is just as hard to find, honestly. But thanks to some friends in the scene, thanks to Davey at Serpent Sword Records and Joshua Kerr, who's a fellow fan, huge shout out to both of those guys. Basically, I had been looking for this for a few weeks, and I've been posting around, you know, if anybody's got one of these and you want to part with it, hit me up. We can try to work out a price or something. But Davey put together an edition of one, a box set of his Vaelastrasz side project, in a nice clamshell case and everything, and basically said, you know, this is up for trade to anybody who can send Eidolon one of these Ben Calder sets, and Joshua Kerr took him up on it. So that was just incredibly nice of both of those guys. I am completely humbled by them doing something so incredibly nice for me, and I will find a way to pay both of them back. I don't know how yet, but I will do something very nice for them in the future. And that's really why I love this scene, is, you know, everybody sort of looks out for each other, in my opinion, and, you know, they're just here to have a good time with each other and have fun with this music, and I just really enjoy that. So you'll actually hear Vin Calder in the background. We're listening to Vin Calder Ambient 1 right now, so that'll be playing while we go over these Ancient Meadow releases. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with, let's see, We've got several releases to look at in this episode, and these are all the last Ancient Meadow drop. So we've got 5 tapes, and we've actually got 2 vinyl releases, one of which is an Ancient Meadow release, one of which is not. It's just an item that Ancient Meadow had the opportunity to distro. So this will be the first time we look at vinyl in an episode of Analog Dungeon. Alright, let's see. The first tape we're going to look at is Örnatorpet. This is an album called, let me find the pronunciation in my notes here. This is an album called Fjällets, Gyllene Slott. And I'm probably not pronouncing this incredibly well, so I apologize to any native speakers or anybody who just knows better and is offended by that. But this is Örnatorpet. This is a project out of Borås, Sweden. I tried pretty pitifully to translate Örnatorpet, and I didn't get much. It seems to mean something like Eagle House or Eagle Cottage, maybe Eagle's Nest. I'm not entirely sure. It seems to be some kind of portmanteau of Swedish words that is resistant to the sort of primitive Google translating that I'm capable of doing. So if anybody knows, or I'm sure somebody knows, if they can tell me what Örnatorpet translates to, that would be fantastic. And yeah, the title of this album is Fjällets, Gyllene Slott, which means something like the golden castle on the mountain. So let's look at the cover of this. So this is on a white tape, and it's got some really beautiful gold printing on it, with this really nice handwritten font and that really beautifully designed logo. Plus, you know, we've got the Ancient Meadow logo and that same sort of scribbly aesthetic. The A and B are in that same handwritten font. That's really great. Let's look at the J card. So this is a piece of art by the Swedish artist John Bauer. John Bauer had a short but very highly revered career in the early 20th century. If you're a Dungeon Synth fan or a fantasy literature fan, you're probably familiar with his work, even if you don't know his name. His mythological artwork is pretty prevalent. A lot of fairy tale illustration, a lot of the illustrations of trolls from classic Scandinavian mythology that you come across are going to be John Bauer's work. And I feel like I probably have a book of John Bauer's art somewhere. If I can find that, I might show that in a future episode. But I'm not sure where that is at the moment. But yeah, you should certainly look up John Bauer if you're not completely familiar, and just check out some of his artwork, because you'll probably recognize some pieces that you've seen as album artwork, and it's just a really nice collection of art to look through. So let's see, on the other side of this J card, we have a piece by the Norwegian artist Theodore Kittleson. Now this is another artist that fans of metal, black metal especially, and Dungeon Synth are going to be very familiar with. Kittelson is a Norwegian artist who had a career, I believe, a little bit earlier than Bauer, but around that same time period, around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And some of the work is similar. I think the breadth of Kittleson's work is probably a little larger, but fans of black metal in particular will probably be aware of his artwork, even if it's just from the Burzum. Some of the Burzum album covers show off some Kittelson art. But yeah, this is a really nice piece. I feel like I read that the title to this piece was... I don't have it written down here. But anyway, it's a really cool piece. And then we've got this moose here that actually seems to be a separate piece from this. So I don't know if that's Bauer or not. This is a mystery moose for the moment. But that does seem to be a third piece of artwork. So, let's see. This is, I believe, the 8th full release from Örnatorpet at this point. I know they have something like 7 to 8 releases. They also have a split with Icegrim, and they have a split with Fantrat, who's a fellow Swedish artist. This album was recorded throughout 2019 and was released in December of 2019. On the whole, Örnatorpet's music is very winter-centric. That's definitely a huge theme. I hesitate to call it winter synth because it doesn't really have that that sort of sweeping minimal soundscape that you get with a lot of winter synth projects. But you know, definitely winter is a huge focus here. More so, Örnatorpet seems to take a lot of inspiration from their home country's mythology and history and geography. There's a lot going on in their catalog that has to do with just the land and the history of Sweden. And then their sound is also just very old school, classic dungeon synth influenced. This album, though, does seem particularly interested in the winter, as the title would suggest. The golden castle on the mountain, and we've got this illustration of a castle in the snow. So it's sort of like we're viewing this Swedish mountain winter from this castle. So, you know, when you listen to this, just imagine yourself there in this lonely keep up in these snowy forested mountains, and it'll really bring you into the mood of the piece, I think. It's really a brilliant piece of dungeon synth, in my opinion. It's really heavy with these immersive fantasy tones. You get a little bit of like fantasy whimsy, and then you get a lot of very nice solemn moments, but the whole thing's sort of dreamy and fairy tale like. I would highly recommend checking out track number 5. That track's called Narskogen Tisnat. That seems to translate to something like When the Forest is Silent. Again, it's very dreamy, serene, solemn atmospheres that come through on that track. It's sort of a perfect balance, I think, between light and dark textures, and it's just overall very meditative. So that's what I think this artist really brings is very nice balance to their work. This album ends with a song called Uti Fjällets Gina Slott, which means outside the golden castle on the mountain. This is a really cool track. It's like 10 minutes, and it just brings to mind these grand sweeping mountain vistas and this just fucking beautiful scenery of the Swedish sort of natural countryside, I guess. This definitely kind of feels like an ode to the landscape of the country. And this song has some really great progressions throughout its 10 minutes. It's a really fantastic listen. So definitely check out Örnatorpet. There's certainly some albums on their Bandcamp that I haven't listened to yet. And I remember listening to those 2 splits, the Icegrim split and the Fantrat split, but I haven't revisited those since they came out, I think. So I definitely need to go back and check those out again. But yeah, there's a nice, solid discography to dig into here. Mystery Moose. All right, let's see where we're gonna go to next. Let's make sure everything's okay with the camera. Imbibe some water. Stay hydrated, folks. Stay hydrated in these dungeons. All right, next we're talking about an artist called Rog, and this is an album called Avalon. So this is a dungeon synth / ambient / neoclassical medieval project out of Croatia. To my knowledge, this artist has no other projects that I'm aware of. This is the second Rog tape that I've obtained, the previous one being Bush and Thicket, which was also released by Ancient Meadow. All of Rog's albums, just sort of browsing through the Bandcamp page and giving some stuff a listen here and there, all of Rog's albums seem to be rooted in fantasy fiction of some type or another. Some of it's weird Lovecraftian occult fiction. There's some that seems to be based in mythology, and then there's some that seems to be fiction that's wholly of the artist's own making. So there's some nice world building and stuff on some of these albums. So that's very appealing to me. This album, Avalon, which you can probably tell by the title and the artwork here, is completely concerned with King Arthur and the mythic island of Avalon. So this was released in September of 2019. Let's open this up. So this is on a gold cassette, and it's got some very nice cassette labels, some graphic cassette labels with the artwork on it. Very, very nice. Let's pull this J card out, and you can see the full piece of art on the J card. So this cover is by an artist called Newell Converse Wyeth. I wasn't completely familiar with this artist, so I did have to do a little bit of research, but it looks like he was a fairly prolific painter and illustrator in the early 20th century. This piece, of course, depicts Excalibur being presented to Arthur in the lake. Looks like we've got Merlin here in the longboat that he's in. These swans back here are interesting. I feel like a similar image appears on the cover of a Luster album. I don't know if it's the same piece of art that's been cropped down or if it's the same artist. I'll have to look that up. That's interesting. That just struck me. But anyway, yeah, let's see, that guy's name was Newell Converse Wyeth. So a lot of his art is illustrative, a lot of fiction illustrations, a lot of mythological illustrations. So very accomplished, competent painter, as you can see here. On the other side of the J card, we've got a track listing, and we've got a fairly long sort of artist statement there. That's available on the Bandcamp page as well, so I would definitely go check that out. Just sort of some flavor and some intention from the artists as to what they were going for on this Arthurian release. So this is an album called Avalon. As we already said, it's pretty much completely concerned with King Arthur. This is an interesting album. And I remember listening to Bush and Thicket. I remember liking it. I think I'm going to have to go back and revisit it, because I think there were probably some other releases that were coming out around the time that tape came out, and maybe I didn't give it enough attention. Because early on, I'm struck on this album by the way this artist plays with pure ambience and the strength of the songwriting and the more compositional elements that they bring into the mix, and sort of how they weave those two elements together. So let's see, on some tracks like Ancestral Memory is the second track after the intro. On Ancestral Memory, you get these excellent strings, very well written song structure there with these excellent strings, very minimalist and somber, but just super tight and well executed. Then on the following track, which is called Lake, you get almost pure ambience. It's just this almost abstract, shifting soundscape that just builds this sort of brilliant, mystic, mythic atmosphere. Then those two tracks, Ancestral Memory and Lake, are followed by Myst. So this track takes both of those elements, that ambience and that really strong songwriting, and sort of blends them together into this almost progressive, still minimalist, but sort of progressive piece. It adds some really nice percussion in, and then you've got that ambience shifting from almost this heavenly awe underneath to this murky sort of mystery. It's really amazing to listen to. And then we've got the title track Avalon, which brings us right back from that into just this pure medieval neoclassical piece that's just full of instrumentation, full of vibrancy, full of life. So there's just so much skill being exercised across these tracks. Different styles are being played around with, but they all work really well together. And what really stands out more than anything is this artist's ability to tell a story through music. So like I said, all of this seems to be really influenced by fiction of some kind or another. And they've obviously taken that inspiration and that love and translated it directly into their songwriting ability, because the concept comes through loud and clear. The storytelling is loud and clear here. There's just something that stands out about every track on here. Everything has something unique or interesting to listen to. You want to go back and hear certain parts again, and you're hearing new things when you go back to those tracks. The technique and style are just eclectic, and the emotional storytelling on top of all that. I really feel like this album is a masterpiece. I really think it's fantastic, and I really think it's underrated, because I haven't seen people talking about it nearly as much as I feel like they should. This album ends with two-part songs, Determination Part 1 and 2, and then Spell of Calm Part 1 and 2. So that's these two epics basically in two parts each. I mean, they could be an EP by themselves. That's how strong they are. So the demonstration of solid, fantasy-focused, competent dungeon synth here is remarkable. It's sort of a complete package of entertainment. It's got a great storytelling, and this is worthy of a lot of praise. So I'm very interested in going back and revisiting Bush and Thicket, and visiting for the first time some of the other releases on this Bandcamp page, particularly the newest one, which was released in December of 2019. That's an album called The Revelation of Malesh. And from what I could tell just by skimming through the text on the Bandcamp page, it looks like that's a totally original piece of fiction that's behind that album by the artist. So, you know, original world building fantasy fiction coupled with a very, very competent, excellent dungeon synth project sounds incredibly promising. So I would encourage everybody to just give this Bandcamp page some time, pick up some of these albums. If this is still available at Ancient Meadow, pick it up, because you're going to want to put this in your collection. That's Rog's Avalon. All right. Let me hydrate one more time. All right, so let's see. All right, this next album is one that I was very, very thrilled when it got announced as an Ancient Meadow release. So this is Vaelastraz. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that exactly correctly, but This is a project based out of Virginia, and it's helmed by Min Nang. A lot of folks probably know Min. He's a fairly active artist and fan in the scene online. You may even remember him from the Dungeon Siege commercials that he did. I know he did the announcements at the 2019 Northeast Dungeon Siege before and between artists and everything. So very cool guy, very active in the community, and this is his main project, Vaelastraz. He is associated with two other projects. Nosferatu Man is a project that he also plays synth in with, I believe, two other folks. And that's sort of a hybrid project where Min brings some dungeon synth, and then I think they've sort of got some post-rock, maybe drone influenced, I guess rock going on, but it's just a sort of a hybrid experimental project with Min and some other folks. And then he's also got a new folk project called Wound Dresser. I think there's only one song on Bandcamp right now, but that's called Wound Dresser, so keep an eye on that, because I know Min is a huge neo-folk fan, so I'm sure that he's bringing some expertise to that genre. Definitely check that out. So Vaelastraz is Min's main project, and it's a fairly prolific project. He's released around 20 albums as of the recording of this video, and these are like long albums too, including this one. This is a long album. This project is heavily influenced by drone music, so it's prone to these long, sort of repetitive pieces, which is a good thing. Don't mistake my use of the word repetitive for anything negative. I feel like he's really accomplished his goal here of taking a dungeon synth sound and sort of boiling it down to its basics and just pulling these perfect fantasy and dark ambient melodies out of that, and then doing what you do with drone music. You pull those elements out over these extended periods, and it really works fantastically. It's like any good drone project or any good doom stoner kind of project like Sleep or something like that, where the melodies and the riffs and the songwriting are so good that you do want to hear these elements over and over, and it just sort of lulls you into that world, especially when we're talking about dungeon synth, this sort of immersive, meditative music. It really does a lot to pull you into the world that's being built here. And speaking of worlds, this project is pretty much exclusively inspired by the world of Warcraft. I think in his interview on the Midnight Ambience podcast, Min basically explained that, he was thinking about starting a dungeon synth project, and he saw, all of these other, literary influenced stuff, myth influenced, Tolkien influenced, all of that's very prevalent, obviously. But he sort of saw a hole in the use of World of Warcraft as an inspiration. And he made this project to sort of find a niche and fill that hole. And he did a great job, because, like I said, he's made over 20 albums at this point. And I don't really think there are any other World of Warcraft projects still. I might be wrong. Maybe there's a release or two, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. Let's see. He's sort of cornered the market on that. I don't really know anything about World of Warcraft myself. I played years and years ago when I was in high school. I think when I was a freshman in high school. And I believe that's when the Burning Crusade had just come out, or was just about to come out, because I remember seeing a lot about it at the time. But that's how long ago it was, and I've never touched it since then. So I know, it's exploded even further past what it was already at that point, which it was huge at that point. But I did a little Googling and a little reading just for context, and I know that Valestraz is the name of a dragon in World of Warcraft, part of the Red Dragonflight, which seems to be some kind of dragon clan. And this album, Adventures of the Red Whelpling, is about a red dragon whelpling, a baby dragon, who is born into this war against the Black Dragonflight, which seems to be like an enemy clan. And I'm sure I sound like an idiot to people who know anything about World of Warcraft, but that's what I gathered. But I think whether you know the lore or not, it's a simple concept, and you can sort of get pulled into it that way. But looking at some of the basic lore that I tried to take a look at, it's kind of making me want to play World of Warcraft. So if I disappear, blame men and blame World of Warcraft, but we'll see if that happens. So this is probably one of my top 10 Dungeon Synth releases. That's not really an established list. Like, I couldn't rattle those off, but I know this is really high up there because I come back to this album a lot. First, of course, let's take a look at the tape, which is on this beautiful red, clear tape. It's got gold lettering, really, really beautiful stuff. But what I really want to look at here is the artwork. So I think probably what stood out to me first about this album was the artwork. This is by an artist called Brie Dava. I think you could find her on Instagram. This artwork to me is just very iconic. It sort of grabs you with its use of color, and I think any Dungeon Synth albums that have original art on the cover are going to kind of stand out. I mean, there's a lot of stuff where folks are using found art, so to speak, old stuff that's in public domain, which is fantastic. There's a long history to that, but that really just makes anything with original artwork sort of stick out. Not that it makes it any better or any worse. It makes it stand out a little bit. So seeing this for the first time sort of had the same effect on me as seeing the artwork for Hedge Wizard's More True Than Time Thought for the first time. It was just like, oh, that's something a little different. That's something that somebody, they had a vision for this album cover. And it's really an honest sell. This is an album that, from its first notes, sort of enthralled me. Let me flip this tape real quick. I'll be right back with you. Right, so yeah, this from the first notes of this album, I was just sort of drawn into it. What really strikes you is the powerful amount of emotion behind some of these songs. There's just this hopefulness and this bittersweetness that runs through the course of this record that's almost addictive. It just makes it addictive to listen to. So the first song is First Flight. So that's sort of an intro. It's only 4.5 minutes, which is much shorter than some of the other tracks on here by less than, or more than half, really. But even at that shorter runtime, you're just pulled into this beautiful world that Min starts to paint for this central Whelpling character. The second song is Rise of the Black Dragonflight / the Lifebinder. So on this one, you get some really great percussion, these sort of resounding martial drums that come back a lot through the course of this album, and that sort of martial sound juxtaposes that emotional synth work that I think drives these songs. The second half of this track, the Lifebinder portion, may be my favorite part of this record. It has some of the most memorable melodies, in my opinion. And it's just this blissful, beautiful, again, bittersweet track to listen to. I go back to that part a lot, and I just want to hear it over and over. So this track kind of has the best of both worlds with that progression between the first part and the second part. It sort of showcases what this project can do in terms of that classic all-in dungeon synth sound, but it's got that flavor at the end that sort of makes the project stand out for me. If you're looking for a track to sort of get to know this record, definitely check that one out. Track 4, The Battle at the Burning Steps, another great example of just pure dungeon synth. It's an 11-minute sort of battle anthem that's just glorious and soaring. That percussion comes back, and you get these heroic horns in the second half. Any classic dungeon synth fan is going to be more than thrilled with that track. And then the last song, which is just a powerhouse. It's 20 minutes. It feels like it could be a release all on its own. That track is called Fly On, Young Whelp, For Your Journey Shall Continue Forever. It's just on point with its emotional atmosphere. I keep using this word, but again, it's so bittersweet to listen to. It's so sort of soothing and serene and emotional. You just want to live in this song, and you're so glad that it goes on for 20 minutes. That's another part of this album that I don't get tired of. You just want to hear that over and over and over. So the sounds that he brings to this album are really amazing. So I please implore you, pick up this album if you haven't. Give it a listen. It's, in my opinion, a completely perfect album. It's from start to finish. It just nails what it's going for, and it's a fantastic example of the genre. And I'll stop gushing about the album now. Wait, let's take a quick look at the inside of that J card. It's a great, and this is the 16th album according to the J card from Vaelastraz. You've got a great old school artist photo there. Fantastic stuff. All right, our next release is Coniferous Mist. We're getting close to time on this. We gotta hurry through some of these. Coniferous Mist is one of my first dungeon synth loves. When I came into the community, this artist started releasing albums not around the same time, I think, and I immediately latched onto this sound. I love Coniferous Mist. So this is a compilation tape of 5 Coniferous Mist releases. Coniferous Mist releases are usually fairly short, and that's sort of owed to the method of the artist, which we'll get into. But this is a compilation of 5 releases comprising Demo 3, Demo 4, Demo 5, Forest Rehearsal, 5/20/2019, and Vast Mountain Castles. So Coniferous Mist is an artist out of Montana, and they've had some releases put out by other labels like Funeral Trance and Castle Wall, and of course this one on Ancient Meadow. But the gentleman behind this project also runs Lost Armor Records and puts out most of his work independently in these small, very hard to catch tape runs, all hand dubbed, all hand assembled. Really beautiful stuff. If you're a dungeon synth fan, if you're a fan of that old school aesthetic. In addition to Coniferous Mist, he's also responsible for the Synth project Serpent's Isle, the Dungeon Noise project Longsword, and a long list of smaller projects. He also puts out some other folks' projects on his label from time to time. So definitely go check out Lost Armor Records. Coniferous Mist and most of the artist's other projects are very concerned with a sort of a lo-fi, raw, sometimes live production. Specifically, Coniferous Mist is recorded by the artist sort of trekking out into the mountains in Montana, into the woods and the mountains with a keyboard and a tape recorder, and just grabbing this music in usually one take or so. All the mistakes are included. So what you get is this very organic sound, often harsh sound, and it's always a unique sound. I think one time I described it as a retro sound that harkens back to a past that doesn't really exist. So it's timeless, in my opinion, but at the same time, it's sort of alien. Like, you can't really put a finger on where you might have heard these sounds before. So that fantasy sensibility is just profound in this work. And when you combine that with some of the pastoral themes and these themes of nature and this sort of hidden natural world where this artist is literally going out and recording in that world, it's just the end result is enthralling, basically. So let's go over these releases real quick. Demo 3 was recorded in late 2018 and early 2019. It's just about 10 minutes. It starts out with these sort of thick, dense synth tones on the track Tome of the Ancients. Then you've got a track called A Silent Frozen Storm that strips down that sound into this sort of desolate, cold, sharp synth work with this howling wind behind it. So already you've just got a lot of playing with the sounds, a lot of playing with the nature that's surrounding the artist while they record. The standout track on Demo 3 for me is Castle Revealed in the Moonlight, which is this sort of warm but gothic and haunting track. Super old school, of course. You can hear a horse in that one. Got to have more horse synth. Fantastic stuff. Demo 4, which follows that, is recorded in spring of 2019. It opens with some really harsh, slow sounds on the track Yawning Valley. There's some bird song in the background. Again, it's just really great to hear how the natural world plays a role in the soundscape that's built on these recordings. So the music itself tends to be very minimalist, but it's infinitely textured by the technique, the recording technique, and the setting that it's recorded in. On this one, I'm particularly fond of the soft, gentle synth that you get on track 5, sinking into the soft ground. That's accompanied by a thunderstorm, which is, I mean, that's fucking cool to hear. Like an actual thunderstorm in the background of a recording. And then we've got some Lord of the Rings love on this one. We've got a track called Strider, which is sort of a jauntier track than a lot of Coniferous Mist stuff. And it's got some samples from what I believe is the animated Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi animated features, but it could be from a radio show. I haven't watched those animated releases in a while to know if that's where that sample was from. Then we'll move on to Demo 5, which was recorded in the summer of 2019. So Demo 3, 4, and 5 that you'll listen to here sort of track the different sort of evolutions, I guess, of the Coniferous Mist sound, just what he was playing with at that point in time. Demo 5, summer 2019, a much more subdued and somber demo. The tracks feel a little more introspective, languid almost. Just these soft, simple sounds. You get a lot of classic themes in the track titles, like Forgotten Citadel Texts and Old Castle Corridors. So that's definitely sort of a foray into some classic themes in both aesthetic and production. Forest Rehearsal 5 2019 that follows that release is just that. It's literally a one-take practice session, no cuts, all recorded straight on that date up in the mountains. The wind takes a huge presence on that recording. It almost drowns out the synths at certain points. Everything gets washed out. It gives it that raw demo feel. It's a 20-minute track that's sort of cut into 8 different sections, all with titles. So it's really cool to hear this bare bones minimalist project, already sort of raw, but this just strips it down even further. So like Demo 5, it's a little more mellow and somber than some of the other work, but it's just completely raw. I really like the segment As My Blood Freezes to the Tangled Coniferous Roots Below. That's a really cool part. It's sort of a dirge that I think exemplifies some of the aesthetic of this project. Just sort of, you know, out in nature, succumbing to nature while you're recording the music. That's just a really cool concept. Interesting thing about the Forest Rehearsal today, it actually got a vinyl release. A vinyl release was put up for pre-order today, so that's really fucking cool. And then the last release on here is Vast Mountain Castles. That came out October 24th of 2019, so later in the year. Also my birthday, so thank you, Coniferous Mist, for that excellent gift. This is a particularly noisy, distorted release, and since it's sort of a named release, it seems to be sort of separate from the demo executions that they've been doing. That distortion, that noise sort of unifies the work. So Vast Mountain Castles, I feel, is a more cohesive piece than some of its predecessors. Texturally, I'm sort of reminded of Aerithrite Throne or Sepharis, maybe, with the amount of distortion and the way it's implemented. But still, you've got that same sensibility that goes through all the Coniferous Mist tracks. So it's definitely Coniferous Mist that you're hearing. And these tracks are just sort of centered around winter and this icy introspection and this idea of going out into nature and finding solitude. And I kind of think that the Vast Mountain Castle that's being referenced here is nature. It's going out and finding these vast empty spaces in nature where you can sort of be alone to look inward. Let's take a brief look at this tape. That's a clear blue tape, really beautiful. And on the inside, I don't know who did this artwork, unfortunately, but we do have some great photography from the artist. So there's the titular Myst from Coniferous Mist. He goes by Myst as this project. Really, really cool stuff. All right, we've got one more tape to go over. All right, this last tape is Spellbine, or Spellbine. I think it might be Spellbine. This is called Of Golden Lightning's Fall. So this is an artist based out of Ohio. He's also responsible for a lot of other projects that I would also highly recommend, including Feasting, Witch's Moon, Orchard, Jubileum. I first encountered him as the project Feasting, which is a really excellent mix of sort of raw lo-fi black metal and dungeon synth. And I was completely blown away by the breadth of his skill and his imagination, really. For one thing, I feel like he has some of the most interesting song titles or album titles, maybe, in the scene. Of Golden Lightning's Fall. I mean, that's just a really cool title. Witch's Moon just put out a new album called An Old Goat's Game of Stars. The poeticism there is just brilliant, in my opinion. There's also a Feasting album released by Ancient Meadow previously called Black Sun from the Goat's Milk. The artist here also has one of my favorite black metal monikers. His name is Oer. So that's O''ER, which is that archaic poetic spelling of over that you'll encounter in a lot of old poetry. I just think that's really cool. But on top of all that, I think his musical ideas are some of the most interesting in this sort of neoclassical medieval dungeon synth scene. So on this particular album, I'm very fond of the use of bells and strings on track 2. That's called Northward Winds. And And then the following track there called Fungal Growth, there's almost an 8-bit tone that's present under everything. That's sort of one of the huge draws to this project for me, is there's almost a fearless use of these eclectic sounds, in my opinion. I think in a less competent hand, that wouldn't come together quite as well. It would be sort of disparate, sort of all over the place. But there's a unity to the progression of sound in this project. So each track feels fresh and interesting, but it never feels schizophrenic in any way. It never sort of goes all over the place. And that's because all of it's backed up by this super, super strong songwriting. So, you know, I know this artist is very competent with a lot of different instruments. I know he obviously very competent with keyboard, very competent with guitar, very competent with drums. Everything he plays, he just seems to really be in tune with that instrument. And yeah, here the song structures and melodies are just brilliant. I think my favorite track is probably, let's see, this track is called Beasts in Hibernaculum. Beasts in Hibernaculum. It's got these sort of primordial bass-heavy undertones, and that's juxtaposed by these sort of bright, beautiful synth leads. And it builds that unique sense of wonder and curiosity that I love in fantasy ambient music. And this album thematically is sort of heavy with a reverence for nature and the natural world and the processes of that world. And I think, as evidenced on Beasts in Hibernaculum and of some of the flavor text on the Bandcamp page, I think one of the themes here seems to be the idea that this old world, this forgotten pagan sort of world, is not really gone, but is just waiting in nature to be reborn. So that's a cool concept to play around with. This is on a black tape with more gold lettering. I really am a big fan of the Spellbine logo there. Really cool. And we'll take a quick look at this before we move on. I don't know who took that cover photo. It might be a photo by the artist, but I don't actually know. But it's excellent thematically with the work. And on the inside, we've got an illustration and then an old school style photo of the artist. So yeah, that's Spellbine's Of Golden Lightning's Fall. There's a lot to dig into in this discography and in all of his work, so I would highly recommend that. All right, we are almost done, so we're going to look at some of the first vinyl pieces on this channel. The first of which is a split between Iogon and Casket of Dreams. So let's talk about Iogon first. Let's see. So this is actually put out by Ancient Meadow. Iogon is out of Georgia, whereas Casket of Dreams is out of California. Iogon is a modern project, whereas Casket of Dreams, most people probably know, has its roots in the 90s scene. So it's kind of cool to see that these old school artists and these new school artists are coming together like this to put together, you know, a split release and just show their support for one another. I really like that. And I know Ancient Meadow has a lot of appreciation for the old school scene, but, you know, they've also done all they can to sort of push a lot of these new school artists out into the forefront of the genre. So that's what we're seeing here is the respect for the old stuff and the respect for the new stuff coming together. So the Iogon side of this has a track called Breath of Eclipses. Very slow, meditative, serene track. Not very lo-fi, just sort of calm fantasy ambience. Very soothing stuff. Definitely check this out. We'll probably talk more about Iogon in a future episode. We'll pull out Tomb of the Crystal Wizard on tape and vinyl, and we'll pull out their other release, Into the Crypt, and take a closer look at Iogon. But this song is a great intro to that project. And then on this side, we've got Casket of Dreams with the song called Radiant Soul Turbulence. And again, it's like the Iogon track, not too lo-fi as far as the genre goes, a little more polished than a lot of dungeon synth work. And this track is actually a little more high energy. It's got some nice percussion, this beautiful sort of warbly synth lead. This almost goes into the realm of sort of like spooky video game soundtracks. So it's kind of cool that, you know, even though this is an old school sort of artist, they've sort of got a modern sound going on. And of course, it's great to hear new tracks by Casket of Dreams. I believe they have a full length in the work, so we'll hopefully see that in the future, and maybe we can bring out their original release, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, on tape and vinyl when that comes out. So Iogon and Casket of Dreams, be on the lookout for those guys in the future when we get some more of their releases in. All right, and then the final thing we're going to look at today is a 7-inch from Grimm. This is the Domains of Spirits. So this is a serious old school release. This was originally put out in 1997 and released again on 7-inch vinyl in 2007 by a Peruvian label called Warkult Productions. And this is actually number 272 of 616 of that Warkult release. So basically Jordan is in contact with the gentleman who runs Warkult, and the guy found some copies that hadn't been sold, and Jordan was able to bring those into Ancient Meadow for distribution. So that's really cool to be able to get our hands on this. This is a 2-track EP. Again, just classic, pure old school dungeon synth in the purest sense of the genre. Cold, frostbitten black metal aesthetics. We've got these sort of battle drum percussions. We've got chanting voices. This sort of has it all for that original dungeon synth sound. On the inside here, we've got great photography. We've got a poem that goes along with the A-side track, The Domains of Spirits. And I mean, that photo on the back is just the epitome of what we're dealing with here. I mean, that's what you want. My favorite part of this, I think, is actually the B-side track, which is Burgatrollet Sista Fard. I think that translates to something like The Last Trip of the Mountain Troll. I really like that track. It's got some strange angular instrumentation. It's a very brooding track. And I think that strangeness is what makes me like it so much. I would really like to be able to get my hands on Grimm's longer release Fard at some point. I don't think I would be able to get an original tape. Those are pretty hard to come by and pretty pricey. But a lot of stuff is getting repressed these days. Ancient Meadows had a lot of luck with his Depressive Silence box set and Funereal Moon compilation. So, you know, we can hope that we see a re-release of this guy's stuff in the future. And we're going to have to close it up now. We are running a little long on this episode, but we had a lot to cover and a lot of excellent stuff to cover. So look out for trolls, and I will see you in the dungeon next time. Thanks.